we do have these things that we look at that are psychological and social events. For instance, you know, sometimes we can have unrealistic personal expectations of ourselves, and we can sometimes have domestic spillovers. How about reduced trust? Kind of going through that with our own organization right now. We went through a little bit of a reorg, and you would think, wasn't that bad? But it did have an effect on the trust to a certain extent. So we're working really hard on that aspect of it to try and correct that. The same thing with reduced caring. You know, people look at how the business treats their coworkers and themselves. And if they get the impression, then that all kind of adds to this. Well, they don't care about me. And of course, the media influence doesn't help. But also, when you look at the jobs in the economy, we're always worried about our jobs, right? Companies are always downsizing. We're doing different things. I mean, from the aspect that when you deal with a political being, which is, you know, the state, county, school district, or whatever, or city, you're dealing with political entities within those organizations. They can change on a dime. They can decide that they're going to get rid of a whole entire department if they wanted to. Now, generally they don't, but I mean, they certainly have some input with there. I mean, even the legislators joke that, you know, during every 2 years when they meet, nobody's safe while they're in town. And it's kind of a little bit of a true thing, but if you think about it, it's one of those things that has an effect on us, is how does the top management look at how the organization is being run? Are they doing a downsize? And how does that affect the people, the little guys? Okay. Now, stress is a big one too, right? There's a lot of things that we have in our lives that cause stress. Money issues, and health issues, and family issues, and there's just all kinds of things that percolate within our lives, and job-wise, right? Because when you're at work, you're thinking about things that you got to get done. You got that immediate project that's being required to get done, and you have to get this done, and this done, and this done, and it seems like that always happens at the same time you got work, or you got things going on at the house. So, see, these things bleed over all the time, so it's hard to keep that separate. Also, how is the leadership style within your organization? And I've worked for all kinds of bosses. I love them, you know. You know, when you give them certain nicknames, you know, sometimes those nicknames aren't the best, right? Most of the bosses that I've had over my lifetime have been fairly decent guys, but they cover the whole range. I've had autocratic, and all the way to laissez-faire, right? And laissez-faire are great guys if you're motivated. If you're motivated to get the job done, and you want to, and it gives you lots of freedom to be able to do things the way you want to do them. However, you're going to find with laissez-faire, what happens? You're out there by yourself, right? Because in a lot of times they'll tell you, oh yeah, go for it, buddy. And I call that, I get on my horse, I get the flag, and I'm riding into the middle of the battle, and all of a sudden I turn around and I'm there by myself. That certainly can have an effect, but the other thing is that if you have somebody that's autocratic and is definitely into the details, and they're focused in on every single thing you're doing, and you have to get permission for everything, and that person is always critical and doesn't say nice things and doesn't compliment you and has a high expectation of what you're going to get done and just wants you to get those things done, what kind of an atmosphere do you think they're building at your workplace, within your organization? Would you consider that maybe toxic? Could be, right? So keep in mind that there are a lot of things, and I didn't want to go into detail on all of this, but I want you just to be aware of what those causal factors are. Because we have to be able to recognize those things, and then we need to be able to address them as part of the prevention. Because if we see somebody stressing, we see somebody that's having a hard time trying to connect all the dots between work and home and all those other kind of things, we have to help them out with that. Okay? Because if we leave that to itself, again, it's that pressure cooker. Now the triggering events, again, these can be anything. They can be unresolved conflicts, frustration, fear, manipulation, intimidation, the feeling that they've completely lost control of anything that they had control before, or they at least thought they had control of before. maybe their mental state. All of these things can kind of come into play here, right? And I love this cartoon. When I found this, I said, you know, what is it? The pastor said it's unhealthy to live with unresolved conflict. Is your husband home? Because in a lot of times, you know, that's the way people approach things. If it gets to this point, you've let it go too far. So when people lose it, when you see that escalation, most people are fairly calm most of the time. And we can get a little agitated from time to time. We can kind of float between those two, but when people start to get agitated, this is probably the best time to kind of have some input to try and bring things back down to calm again. But what we look at is it gets aggravated, then we get into verbally hostile, verbally threatening, physically threatening, and then this is where we go into crisis mode. So where we have the most ability to kind of nip this is to be able to talk when this is still in the verbal stage, where we can have some control in this aspect. So we do have some de-escalation techniques, and this isn't all of them. These are just some that I found interesting and that I thought were useful, okay? So the first one being is that you maintain extra space between you and whoever it is that you're talking with. Because what happens is in an argument, we see it in sports, they like to close ranks, and if you close ranks and you get into somebody else's bubble, we all have our personal space, right? And somebody gets in our personal space, perceived threat. So maintain that extra space. So if they walk towards you, walk back. If you ran out of room, ask them to step back a little bit, be calm about it. Stay at the same eye level. Now I realize that we're all different heights in the room. So, the thing is to have ask people to sit down. Because if people sit down, they have less options. They're a lot less likely from a sitting position to get physically violent than they are at a standing position, because at a standing position they have all kinds of options they can go through, okay? Never turn your back on them. Always keep them forward, and don't stand nose to nose. Always kind of stand off to the side so that you're not giving them a direct target. If they do decide to get physical, you're not going to get cold cocked, so you're kind of off at an angle to a certain extent. Keep your hands free. And also be aware of your setting. Where are you at? Where's the exit at? And always try and position yourself close to an exit so that you can get out of the room in a hurry if you need to. But you know what I'm saying. You don't want to block yourself. You don't want to get cornered in there to where you have no options. So be aware where those exits are and have a plan on how you're going to get to that exit. The other thing is that to understand that you need to set time limits for discussions. You want to hear them out. They need to have someone hear them out. Now, if you're dealing with a customer, that's the best thing to do is be able to listen to their complaint. You don't want to empathize and say, oh yeah, if I was in your position, I'd be just as upset as you. Well, you're just asking for trouble at that point, right? Instead, hey, I understand your point, and let me take a look at that, okay? But whatever the case is, if you sat and you're going to sit there and let them talk for an hour and a half, all that's going to happen is they're going to start rotating that conversation around and again and again and again, and all they're going to be doing is each time it's going to make them more upset because nothing's getting fixed, and so it's just going to heighten their irritation, and you're just working up the chain.